Thank you again for joining this webinar today. This webinar is sponsored by the Institute on Disability and Human Development and the Leadership Education and Neurodevelopmental Disabilities Blend Program, both at UIC's Department on Disability and Human Development, as well as the Autism Program of Illinois. Funding is provided in part by the Autism Program of Illinois and the Illinois Department of Human Services. We are very excited to have Litany here with us today to share about this important topic. Take it away, Litany.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. Let's start a conversation about money, an introduction to financial wellness and disability. So I'm going to pass this slide here and go to my introduction. So again, my name is Litany Esguerra. I use she, her pronouns. The image description of myself, I have a picture of me on the slide here. I'm an Asian American woman and I'm smiling and wearing glasses, and I also have long black hair and a black blouse on. So I'm an academic advisor with the Department of Disability and Human Development, or DHD, for the Certificate in Cooperative Career Experience, or co-op program. I'm also a trainer with the National Disability Institute, and that stands for NDI. NDI is an organization that aims to build better financial futures and independence for people with disabilities. And I also just wanted to make it clear for my role in this presentation is that I'm not an official financial advisor or financial counselor, but as a trainer with NDI, I'm here to start a conversation with you all. That is to introduce you to some language and knowledge around financial wellness, as well as direct you to some resources and even lead you to taking action around managing your own money. So in other words, I'm right here with you when it comes to learning and applying this knowledge of financial wellness in my own life. And then just as a fun fact just to help us get into starting a conversation around money, I think what I like to start with is my first memory or earlier memories around money. I used to have a grandpa who carried a lot of cash in his pocket, and he would always tell me as a little girl, if you carry a lot of money with you, appear as casually as you can. So as if you don't have any of that money with you. And I don't know why that stuck with me, but I think if you all think now about your early memories about money, there's just some great bits of wisdom that you can find in the lessons that people like our grandparents and our parents taught us when it came to money. Okay, and then just a brief comment on affiliations. Anam already introduced some of the organizations here, but I also just wanted to thank NDI, the National Disability Institute, since they are the ones who developed a lot of this content. Okay, and for our agenda today, I wanted to shape our thinking around this question. And this is essentially what inspired me to organize this presentation. And I had to ask myself whether or not you are a student with a disability or a person with a disability, but just generally when you were younger as a student or as a young adult, what information did I wish I knew sooner about financial wellness and managing my own money? And that's what this presentation is organized around, gaining the vocabulary and knowledge for the resources that you need to understand a complex financial system. And it's especially important for people and students with disabilities to understand what that means as well. So in this presentation, we will define what financial wellness means. We will identify common barriers that people and students with disabilities might be facing when it comes to financial wellness. We'll also learn about strategies and steps towards achieving financial wellness, and then we'll find out about community resources. It is also my goal for you all, anyone who is interested in this topic, that you can find knowledge and apply it in your life. And it doesn't have to be a really big step. It's something actionable, something small that you can take when it comes to managing your own money. I also wanted to preface this presentation to say that some of this information can be a lot, especially if you're new to it. But I also wanted to be clear that it is okay, more than okay, if this information is new to you and takes longer to process. There's a lot of acronyms that I will try to explain and go over. And after this presentation is over, there's quite a few links to resources and other webinars that you can look up and see if there's anything from there that you can learn more about in depth. But before we begin, I wanted to start with an activity. And this is just to get you thinking about what you spend money on. We're not going to be that specific. It's really general. But I encourage any of you who are attending this webinar to use the chat function of this platform and to comment the word either the words needs or wants. And I'm going to say an item or a resource, and you can comment need or want. And it's optional, but I'd appreciate if you could comment. So I'm going to ask this question here. Is spending money to pay for your rent, is that a want or a need? And if you could comment in the chat box what you think it is, that would be great. Yep, I'm seeing a lot of needs here, of course. Okay, and then the next question here. How about spending money to pay for transportation, like your bus, a car, or a bike? Is that a want or a need? Yep, seeing a lot of needs. That's important too. All right, the third one here. How about paying for medication? Is that a want or a need? Okay, seeing a lot of needs, definitely. How about this? Is paying for the internet, is that a want or a need? Yeah, need nowadays, of course. Okay, and then there's two more here. How about paying for Netflix? Is that a want or a need? Want, yeah, I agree as well. And then last one is paying for vacation. Is that a want or a need? All right, everyone's saying that it's a want. Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. And just for a quick image description, I thought it would be fun to put this image. It's a balance scale with a strawberry on the left and a marshmallow on the right, and kind of indicating how we're trying to balance between things that we want and what we need to spend our money on. Okay, and thank you everyone for participating in that activity. And let's look at that definition of what needs and wants are. So needs sounds straightforward, things that we have to pay for every month. So like what I was saying earlier around rent or food, transportation, the internet nowadays. And then wants are things that we pay for that we enjoy and let us have fun. So video games, movies, sometimes vacation, but we sometimes need a vacation as well. So movies, music, Netflix, things like that. And what we can learn from this little exercise is that we don't always have the money to pay for everything that we want. And it's really important that we determine what our needs and wants truly are. But I think we also need to acknowledge that our wants are valid. While I don't always consider Netflix a need, I want it, right? Because it helps me relax, helps me enjoy time with my family and keep up with the latest shows. And so part of financial wellness then is understanding how to balance our money in terms of things that we need to pay for and things that we want to spend on. So I hope that this activity is helpful to help you categorize how you spend your money in terms of these two relatively straightforward terms. Okay, so this next section then is going into defining what financial wellness means. And actually, prior to becoming a trainer with the National Disability Institute, I've heard of this term, but I didn't know what it actually meant. And the definition that I'm getting from here is through the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And this is a government agency. And they define financial well-being or financial wellness in 4 parts. So 1 is feeling in control of your finances. The second part is having the capacity to absorb a financial shock. 3 is being on track to meet your goals. And then 4 is having the flexibility to make choices. And I recognize that financial shock isn't defined, but financial shock is essentially something, and it's an unexpected expense, something that you didn't plan on paying for. So that could include an unexpected healthcare cost or a car repair. But just so you have another idea of this definition in other words, this example here are different ways of looking at this definition. So it's having control over my own money, having enough money to handle a major expense or financial shock, having everything that I need and want, having enough money for a good quality of life, and setting and reaching money goals. And the goals relates to this image on the slide. In the image description are just some darts in the middle of a target, kind of like indicating a goal that you're trying to reach. And this way of defining or redefining financial wellness is on everything, having everything that I need and want. This goes a little bit into what our exercise did, right? It's determining what your money pays for, what you need and what you want. And that's also, that's part of financial wellness, being proactive in knowing what those needs and wants are. Then we have to ask ourselves, how do the rights of people with disabilities then apply to this definition of financial wellness? And that can be found through the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA of 1990, which is a landmark civil rights legislation which ensures that people with disabilities have the same rights and opportunities as everyone else. And part of the ADA includes this right to live and work in the community. But this is just as important to learn how to manage your finances. And that's found through this definition or through this word, economic self-sufficiency. And so I'm going to read out on the slide here. Economic self-sufficiency is around making good decisions for working, earning money, using your money wisely, and saving and planning for your future. It also involves setting goals to advance employment and economic status. It's also about building assets, being financially well, and working towards your dreams and goals. So it's interesting, right? Financial wellness is included within this term, but there's a lot of parallels when it comes to just making decisions around money or using your money or saving and planning. There's a lot of parallels in the two definitions that I just presented to you. I also want to add in, sometimes economic self-sufficiency in the ADA has to do with access to knowledge and resources. So a lot of people with disabilities don't even have that access to the tools that they need to achieving financial wellness. So what are those barriers then, right? We talk about economic self-sufficiency as this right and this lack of access that people with disabilities don't always have. And there are a lot of barriers. There's a reason why people with disabilities needed this term economic self-sufficiency to be recognized as a right. So on this next section, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the barriers that people with disabilities face and highlight some reasons why economic self-sufficiency must be recognized. And we'll look at that through context and through statistics. So on here, I'm going to give you some general disability statistics. You might have heard about it. or heard some version of these before. But it's estimated that 37% of people with disabilities are employed, compared to 79% who don't have any disability. I put a star next to 37% because this number has been changing over the last few years. Part of that is due to the pandemic, but generally that's the number that has been presented. The second bullet point here, working age people with disabilities are more than twice as likely to be living in poverty as those without a disability. Only 39% of people save for unexpected expenses compared to those without a disability. So those unexpected expenses means that financial shock. So only 39% of people have enough savings for a financial shock. And then lastly on here, 28% of households with disabilities have no assets or are in debt. Maybe it's because they're trying to get their education or paying for transitions from school to work or paying for other long-term supports. Some general student statistics. It's estimated that the average public university student borrows around $30,000 to attain a bachelor's degree. I personally thought that was pretty low, but that might be different compared to private university students. And then generally, the trend for student loan debt has doubled since 2007. And then what I also found was that 19% of students reported living with a disability who attended university. And that was in 2015 to 2016. And it was really interesting because there's not too many sources that explore the financial impact of disability on students while they're in college. And then there's also the other factors of like additional barriers that people with certain race or ethnicity might be experiencing as well when it comes to accessing education and being disabled. So just in summary, oh no, I think I might have skipped a slide. Maybe it's not included. So I think there was another slide that I meant to include here, but there's also extra costs of living with a disability. And when we're able to send you an updated version of the presentation, it will include it. But there's a lot of extra costs when it comes to living with a disability. I recently attended this webinar, also hosted through the National Disability Institute. And in this study, they estimated that 17 adults with disabilities required an additional $17,690 per year at the median income level to pay for extra costs related to their disability. So that could have included personal assistance services, out-of-pocket healthcare costs, accessible housing, or some sort of car modification. And then the other point that I wanted to include, which will be updated as well, are a lot of people with disabilities use benefits, and these benefits have income limitations. So people who are receiving SSI or SSDI, and the terms are really long, but it stands for Supplemental Security Income or Social Security Disability Insurance. They have income limitations of having up to $2,000 if you're single in order to remain eligible for your benefits and even for healthcare, including Medicaid. So just to summarize all of that, there's a lot of higher rates of poverty and debt and access to financial services, even a lack of empowerment when it comes to thinking about your money. And it's difficult to think about your goals when you're thinking only about money and loans. So the question has to be, now what? What can someone do to counteract these really unfortunate statistics? And I would say no one has the like full answer, but I think it's in part of shifting our thinking about money and finances to think strategically about how money is a way to help achieve goals that you have for yourself. And also financial management or financial wellness is a form of exploring options and exercising choice in your life. So this is where I'm going to focus the bulk of the presentation on. And this is a way to better understand how to take those steps towards managing your own money. And this is through the NDI strategies for financial stability or financial wellness. And just for a description of the diagram on here. So the diagram that was developed is essentially a circle that is connected by an arrow, and it connects each strategy, which is described in 6 boxes. So starting at the top is your goal. Then it's connected with benefits planning and work supports, and then employment. Then next is free tax preparation, then financial coaching or financial education. Lastly is asset development, and then that arrow connects back to the goal. So it's a full circle. And one thing before I go into each strategy is to recognize that the goal can be financial wellness, but it's also a goal that is directed by you. So that could mean living in the community, or finding a job, paying off student loans, or buying a house, buying a car, things like that. They can be really big goals that you have for yourself or really small goals, something that you think that your money can be directed towards when you're trying to save and manage your finances. And then, as it says on the slide here as well, this is a framework for understanding a complex financial system, right? These strategies are trying to help make it in a way that's more understandable for you to apply this complex financial system into a goal that is directed and determined by you. So the structure for the next section is I'm going to go over the 5 strategies, excluding the goals, and I'll explain each component, and I'll try to add in an example or resource for you to look into. Okay, so starting first with benefits planning and work supports. And I didn't include this statistic earlier, but approximately 65% of working adults with disabilities use some sort of public safety net program, including benefits. And so what are benefits? Benefits are basically cash assistance made available by the federal, state, or local government that helps people who need assistance with food, healthcare, housing, and day-to-day expenses. So I mentioned earlier there was SSI, SSDI. Those are very commonly used by people with disabilities. Some other examples are SNAP, which is a Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. There's the Plan to Achieve Self-Support, the Family Self-Sufficiency Program through the Housing and Urban Development. There's Medicaid. There are a lot of benefits. And then connected with this are work supports. So these are supports that lead, they're also like benefits, but they are directed towards job retention or finding a job and being placed in a job, or finding advancement in your employment status. And benefits work with work supports to help you be able to do a job. So for example, people who have SSI or SSDI can get a bus pass, and that transportation is really important so you can actually get to work. And there are other two, and again, it was not, I'll have to update the slide as well. That was my fault here, but there's 2 other ones that I think are important for you to learn about. There's the impairment related work expense. That's another great work support that helps people direct some of their income towards modifications that can be made for work. And then there's the student earned income exclusion, which is another work support that helps people who are receiving SSI while attending school to retain more of their SSI benefits and healthcare eligibility through Medicaid. So then another thing that I wanted to acknowledge that, so a lot of people use and need benefits, but they can be limiting, right? And one of the more recent solutions to that income limitation that people who are receiving SSI or SSDI need are these ABLE accounts. And it stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience account, which is a tax advantage savings account for individuals with disabilities. So essentially what it is a way to supplement your benefits without replacing them. And people can safely save their money and use that money in this account to pay for qualified disability expenses. And that goes into what I was talking about earlier on these extra costs of living with a disability. So this money can go towards those extra costs. And that might include assistive technology or even housing and dorms, towards food and groceries and even financial management services. I really encourage you to look at the IDHD Able Account webinar, which has been posted. That was about a year ago that it was done. But if you wanted to learn more specifically about how Able accounts can be started by you and the specific eligibility requirements, I really encourage you to look into that webinar. And then lastly, when it comes to benefits, we also need to consider that there's a lot of benefits to learn about. I mentioned just a short list of what is available to many people. And really what someone needs to do is to get benefits counseling if they believe that they need more help in understanding that landscape. It's a specialty for people to go into benefits counseling. And just so you have a reference of some of the common terms used when it comes to finding benefits counseling, it's called CWIC or WIPA. So CWIC stands for Community Work Incentive Coordinator, and WIPA stands for Work Incentive Planning Assistance. So towards the end of the presentation, I'll be including some local resources to find your CWIC or WIPA. Okay, so the next strategy that was on the diagram is around employment. And I really wanted to focus a little bit more on the relationship between benefits planning and employment. And before I even go into that, there's a lot when it comes to employment and disability. There's even some policy changes that have been happening in the last few months regarding changes to sub-minimum wage phase-out laws, and increasing the labor market rates of people with disabilities. So there's a lot, and I won't go into it too much, but there's also the impact of the pandemic on progress made around employment. So what I really want to focus on again is that benefits are often seen and used as a step towards helping a person be able to pay for daily expenses, but also to work. So that way they don't always need to use benefits to pay for those expenses. And work or jobs is a source of income, right? Money that you can manage and think about when you're trying to reach a goal. So employment can be a goal or can also be a means to a goal. So I included three potential places where a person with a disability might be looking for employment outside of education as well, or in addition to education. So that's, of course, vocational rehabilitation, or VR. That one's commonly heard of and used. There are American Job Centers, which is very similar to VR, but a little bit newer based on the policy that it was created from. And then there are also employment networks. And the three sources here, they all have pretty much the same goal, right? It's to help a person get a job or keep a job. They're each managed by a different government agency or started under a different policy, but they're often connected. And it's important, I included links to at least the American Job Centers and employment networks because they do offer services like job coaching and counseling. And they also help with benefits counseling to see how you can use your benefits and work supports towards helping with employment outcomes. And yeah, so I also included this slide. I mentioned it earlier in the benefits, but I wanted to incorporate how this work support is relevant to students. So anyone who is a student can look into how they can remain a student while also work. And this is just an example, the student earned income exclusion, which helps SSI recipients who work and attend school keep their SSI benefits and remain eligible for Medicaid. So it really just offers students the chance to work and save money and also have that work history, which is really important. There's a link to it on this slide as well, if you wanted to look into that as well. And I also included federal work study programs, but I think we'll skip that for now. Okay. So this third category then is on free tax preparation. So this is the third strategy. And what this does is to help an individual actually achieve financial goals is to make sure that they file taxes. It might sound really straightforward, but it's important that people learn about what taxes mean and how preparing and filing taxes is actually beneficial to a person. And I think there's some myths that people with disabilities might think they don't need to file taxes if they have low wages, or if receiving a tax refund could impact their benefits, which they don't. And the important thing is to see that filing and preparing taxes is not only helpful, but it should be free. And there are a lot of resources to help a person file taxes. And I'll give an example of what it could do to benefit a person. So again, I say on the slide here that preparing and filing your taxes is and should be free, right? And one great resource for doing so is through the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance site. So it's called VITA site. I included a link here. So if you click on that link, you can put in your zip code, and that will direct you to a local VITA site where you can set up an appointment with a tax preparer. And again, completely free. You're never supposed to pay any money for filing your taxes. There's other options here to do your taxes on your own through an easy to use self-preparation tool. So there's myfreetaxes.com or creditkarma.com. I personally used Credit Karma when I was doing my taxes this year, and it was really easy to use. But also you need to be aware of some sites that say they're free but ask for money anyways, like TurboTax. But just these three examples are great resources to find free tax preparation services. So let's just think of a good example then of how filing taxes is actually helpful for a person with a disability. So say someone learns about the Earned Income Tax Credit, and then they want to go to their local VITA site and ask about their eligibility or file for it, or they're on Credit Karma and they find a self-preparation tool that asks if they want to apply for this Earned Income Tax Credit. So first of all, what is that EITC? What it is a refundable tax credit that reduces or eliminates the taxes that any low-income working individual or family might have to pay. And the reason why it's an important tool to improving economic status is, first of all, not many people actually apply for it. So it's estimated that nearly 1 million individuals with disabilities don't file for this EITC. And the average amount returned back was $2,488. And that's per year. That's a lot of money that a person could get back. Especially if they're low income and need benefits to help pay for their daily expenses. That's a lot of money back. And through NDI, I also learned of a story of this man who applied retroactively or for some of his taxes in the past with the Earned Income Tax Credit. And I think he was a single father of 2 children. And he received up to $15,000 back from this refundable tax credit because he actually filed for his taxes and made sure to ask about this type of tax credit for, related to his income status. And I won't go into the eligibility, but what's important then is to understand that it doesn't impact people's benefits. Tax refunds are meant to help people, are meant to help you and not harm your benefits. There's a lot of misinformation now. So the important thing is to file taxes regardless of your income. Make sure that the taxes are free or that you're using free tax filing services. And also go online and through the IRS, which is the Internal Revenue Service, and learn more about types of tax credits or refunds that could apply to you, especially if you have dependents. Okay, so we have two more strategies here, and this one's on financial education and financial coaching. So financial education is having the knowledge and understanding of financial matters. Sounds pretty simple, but it's not. If you look at this list here, knowing how to manage money, saving, budgeting, banking, having a credit report and knowing what your credit score is, knowing your loans and debt and how much you owe, understanding your paycheck and using financial services. There are a lot of things to consider when it comes to your own financial education. So this webinar is just an example of what financial education could be for you, but you also have to understand that this is a process, right? You will see that as you work and earn different amounts in your career, or if you change careers and have different life transitions, there's a lot of financial education that changes over time. So even just for me, it was transitioning from being a graduate student to a full-time employee. There's a lot that I have to consider with my loans and debt and managing my money, which is different even within the last 2-3 years than it is now. And this other point on financial coaching is also really important because people can work with a financial coach to help them not only achieve financial goals, but also receive financial education. But that can also be hard to find or even hard to pay for if you're trying to look for a financial coach. Instead, if financial coaching isn't always an option for you, what you can really look into are financial services. So financial services are things that help you with your money. And that could include going to a bank and opening up a checking account or savings account, having a credit card, using money orders or using prepaid cards. I also mentioned the ABLE accounts. And financial services can actually help you with developing a financial education, both formally and informally, without always needing to rely on a financial coach. And when it comes to ABLE accounts as well, we went over that earlier, but that's just another tool of a financial service that you can use and get specific assistance and financial education from. So I encourage you to think about what you use and why. And especially with that why component, like why is having a bank account really important for you other than to hold your money safely? And just for a quick image description, on the slide here is a person signing a check. And that kind of relates to having a checking account, especially if you're needing to use checks to pay for rent or you're receiving a check from work. Okay. So then the last strategy in this circle is on asset development. So what assets are is anything that an individual owns, and that includes tools and resources that can help an individual achieve optimal financial stability and potentially reach their financial goals. So there's a few types, right? The traditional type of asset is like owning a car, having a home, having stocks or insurance, a savings account, or owning a business. These traditional types of assets have a lot of economic value to them with a future economic benefit. So that could help a person show to the bank that they have financial stability and can keep up having a home or having a car because you can maintain this type of asset financially. And later on in life, if you wanted to sell your home, you could do so as well. So it has that future economic benefit. But what's really important, especially for young adults and students, is that there are a lot of overlooked assets that you can be developing now that aren't always of economic benefit in the future, but have a lot of benefit for you overall, and even leading towards those traditional assets. So one example is your network, right? We don't always think about who we know as really important assets, but actually it is. A person that you know could help you get a job or find an apartment that you wanted to live in and rent one at the price that you want. That's a really important thing to consider when you have a network. Another one, of course, is your education, right? It's often seen now that having a bachelor's degree or even a master's degree will lead to better employment outcomes and to higher earning potential. But then other things like a work history, it doesn't matter that if you do have a degree or not, but if you have this history of working at different places, you could have references from that work that could help you find another job that you like. And then again, I also mentioned ABLE accounts. That's just another type of savings account that you can think about as another tool or resource that you can own and develop. So I encourage you to think about as well what assets that you already have, especially when it comes to your network or your work history, and then what assets you're also trying to work towards having. And also, I didn't include that an overlooked asset could even be your phone and your laptop, right? Your laptop, if you work remotely, is something that really helps you be able to work and earn money. So think about those kinds of assets as well. And just for a quick image description, this is just a picture of some people wearing some graduation caps. And I thought that was a nice way of thinking about education as an asset that a lot of people are trying to develop. Okay, so we went through all 5 of these strategies, and I wanted to take a brief, I wanted to briefly apply this in context. And I'm going to go through it a little bit quickly just for the sake of time, but I am presenting you with this example scenario. So say we have a student with a disability. They're a sophomore and they're 20 years old. They have a part-time job and they're also a full-time student working towards a bachelor's degree. They live on campus, but one of their goals is to live in an off-campus apartment. So how can we use the NDI framework? And then later on, I hope that this is a way for you to apply to yourself as well. So let's look at the goals, right? We already identified that this student wants to live in an off-campus apartment. And another thing that is not fully mentioned here is that they're working towards a bachelor's degree. So this goal could be something that's another part of their goals. So let's look at the first slide here, or not the first slide, the first strategy, benefits planning and work supports. So when it comes to benefits planning, let's say the student learned about the student earned income exclusion work support. And they actually go to their benefits counselor through a CWIC or WIPA to ask about how this benefit can be used towards living in an off-campus apartment. All right, so the next one, employment. While the student is already employed, they have a part-time job, but how might they think about this later on after they graduate? It might be a new goal that they need to develop once they complete their bachelor's degree to think about what employment means for them as a new goal. The next part here is on free tax preparation. So earlier I talked about the earned income tax credit eligibility. So, or he recognized that he's eligible for this tax credit. And say if he does receive that average of $2,400, imagine how much of that money could go towards living in this off-campus apartment, whether it's for rent or other bills or paying for a security deposit. And then the last 2 here, financial education or financial coaching. Perhaps this person wants to go to a service provided on campus to learn how to understand their paycheck and manage money from their paycheck so they can better pay for things that they need to live off campus. And then lastly, the assets, as I was just describing, that developing a network, this person wants to develop their network from their school and from their job, but also their asset is that they're a student, right? They are working towards a degree. So the bottom line with this is that not everything's going to be in order, but there is a way that you might be able to apply the NDI framework in your own life, especially when it is directed around a goal that you have for yourself. And also those goals are changing. Okay, so we have a few more minutes left. I wanted to direct you to the last section here on community resources. So one important one is through benefits counseling, right? And there's the CWIC and WIPA that I keep mentioning, and there's one available in Chicago through the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities, as well as through the rest of Illinois, through the Illinois Assistive Technology Program. So I encourage you all to click on those links and even email them. I included those emails on the side here if you think this would be a really great way for you to receive free benefits counseling, an emphasis on free again. Again, there's the VITA site, Volunteer Income Tax Assistance. So there's a link to that if you wanted to see where your local VITA site is. And then the last three here are also really important to talk about. So I keep mentioning National Disability Institute. They have some great tools that you can download for yourself. So there's the My Spending Plan. There's also a goal setting worksheet that you can download and figure out what your goals are. And there's the Able Account National Resource Center, which is a really great resource for you to look into about figuring out your eligibility by state for opening up an Able account if that is relevant to you. There's also a plain language version. And then lastly is if you would like a full version of this training, you can do so through one of our partners, Access Living, and their 11-part series on money management. So essentially what this presentation and this webinar is an introduction to this 11-part series that you can attend about money management, because there's a lot to learn about. So I encourage you to look into any of these resources and see if that could apply to you or something that you can learn from. And I recognize that we're at 12:50 right now, and I wanted to just include some next steps for you. But in addition to the community resources, there are other tangible steps, like, as we said in our activity, we tried to figure out our needs and wants. We also tried to track our spending, and you can do that through tracking your spending. And then what you do afterwards is to create a spending plan, or you identify your goals, or even other things like finding out your credit score, which could be really scary or not scary, depending on what your credit score actually is. And then lastly, of course, is determining what community resource or organization is important for you to look at or to contact further. Okay, and then I included a summary, but I wanted to save some time for question and answer. And I hope that you are all able to understand a lot of this information, or at least have some idea of a next step that you'd like to take. But it's 12:51. Can we go into some questions and answers if there's any?
Yeah, thank you so much for the informative presentation, Litany. There was just so much wonderful material. We do have a few questions. The first one we have is, what if I still don't know what my goals are? What can I do to start to figure out my goals?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think this is actually a really fun one to figure out. And there's a few options that you can do, and I can send this out through an email afterwards. But one great exercise to do is to create a vision board. And vision boards are essentially a collage of images and words that represent something that you do or that you want to look towards doing. And that could just mean hobbies that you enjoy, things that you do to be social, or even putting your needs and wants in as a list into a visual through this vision board. And just one example of it, I have on my vision board that I like to travel and try new restaurants and go to coffee shops, right? That's part of a goal that I could create for myself, is how can I set aside money for these things that I want, and then put in a vision board, a cup of coffee or a plane or some sort of food. And, that's just one exercise that you could do for yourself. There's another one that I just mentioned earlier through the National Disability Institute. They have a goal setting worksheet where you could identify through the STAR method, which is specific, timely, action-oriented, and realistic. So determining things that you just need to do. So sometimes when you think about things that you need to accomplish or need to do, and then see how that can be translated into a goal, that's a great way to start. Or if you're like me and you want to do something fun, maybe through Pinterest, or if you like drawing or something like that, you can create a vision board. Okay,
Thank you
do we
for
have any?
answering. That sounds great. Yeah, we have a few more questions. One of them is, how can I develop better spending habits?
That's also a really good one. And it connects with our exercise on needs and wants, right? Because in order to
Mhm.
figure out what you want or need, you have to learn about how you're spending your money. And I think the simplest answer is to first track it, then assess the patterns that you have in your spending, and then adjust it or set a new goal to your spending. So, for example, I downloaded this app called Money Manager. There's other ones. I think another popular one is called Mint. Try, and you could try different ones. But I like Money Manager just because you can create a list of things that you spend on. But then also, you should be aware that if you use something like Mint and you have to connect it to your credit card, if you're comfortable with doing so. But I chose to do it manually, and I put an alert when I was reaching my budget towards social spending. And the only reason why I was able to determine the patterns that I have in spending was through tracking it. And I could see that I was really good at paying for the things that I needed, and then I was spending too much on the things that I wanted. That meant when I was with my friends going out to a restaurant that I kept spending too much on that. And that's where I started to adjust and set my new goals in spending.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Mint is a great one. I think if you have Chase Bank, sometimes you can also trace, you can also look at your spending through that. Those are really great tools. And the other one that you mentioned. We have another question. It's a great one. Where can I go to receive financial coaching services?
Yeah, that's a good one too, because I mentioned that sometimes financial coaches cost money, which sounds a little bit like the opposite intention that you want. But I was trying to look up some resources, at least through locally through UIC, even just going, or if you're a student at another university, if you go to your financial aid office, they're really good at helping you understand what financial aid even means, especially as a student, right? So find the sources that are closest to you. And I also found UIC has at least actually through the U of Illinois system, this Student Money Management Center. And they also have resources to free money mentors that you can connect with and just have a session with to understand what financial coaching could mean in your life. So it doesn't always mean that they're going to coach you through every single purchase that you made. But if you find a free resource like this Student Money Management Center, you can at least get a session to see what you need to be learning about or doing when it comes to spending money. And then the other part for receiving financial coaching services, I mentioned again that if earlier that people that are receiving benefits can actually work with that office to identify where they can receive financial coaching service. So sometimes they might be able to get it through their benefits counselor, but also they should ask for referrals. They could say, I think I need help with financial coaching. How can I make sure I retain my benefits, but also use some of that money from my benefits to pay for a financial coach? And again, so working with a government agency or a benefits counselor to identify where you can get financial coaching or advising is another great resource for getting this type of service.
Awesome, thank you. And then we'll have one last question and then we can wrap up. Because I
Okay.
still have trouble receiving the appropriate work support and benefits for myself. What can I do to learn more about my rights to receiving benefits, planning assistance?
Yeah, that one's a really hard one to think about, right? Because usually we hope that benefits counselors can be our one-stop shop to getting all the benefits planning assistance that we need. And the reality is that some of our benefits come from different government agencies, right? So there's Social Security Administration that provides SSI and SSDI benefits to people, but say you're also getting a work support from vocational rehabilitation. And there's a lot of discrepancies when it comes to how different government agencies are able to provide benefits counseling because they're just run by a different government agency. And I think to learn more about your rights to receiving the appropriate benefits planning is first knowing that sometimes it includes self-advocacy and gaining knowledge about the specific benefits that you have. So that could include knowing the specific income limits that you're supposed to be following, or the work supports that are available that you're using, or and then more importantly, are updates to the benefits that are constantly being changed when it comes to income limitations or the amount of money you can set aside. So usually a benefits counselor is helpful, but it's important to develop your own self-advocacy skills and keeping up to these changes and making sure that you can check with your counselor and even educate them about a recent change to some benefits that you're receiving. I hope that answered that question. That one can be really hard to think about, especially when it comes to like developing your own self-advocacy skills on benefits.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for answering those and for presenting today. Do you want to go over the last slide, Litany, about the evaluation?
Yes, just wanted to say a quick thank you for attending this webinar. I would really appreciate if I just sent that link in the chat. If you all could fill out this evaluation form, I'm always welcome for any constructive feedback and just ways in which we can provide you with more information and specific information on financial wellness. So I'd really appreciate your feedback. But then thank you again for attending this webinar. I appreciate your time in the middle of July at noon, and hopefully there's something here that you were able to learn from and take action on in the future.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining the webinar today, and Litany for presenting. Yeah. And the link for the follow-up is in the chat.